Welcome, heathens and witches. We're starting a podcast. We're back for another one. Man, I totally forgot how we start these. But it's like 2 weeks. You would think I could remember this, but boy howdy, I cannot.
At the beginning of every episode, we're like, how do we start this again?
I don't know why.
And I'm always like, we should
is?
listen to like a previous episode, or maybe I should put it in the notes.
It's because it's different than the rest of the content I produce for YouTube, for the intro. And I've been doing the same intro for YouTube for like the better part of, what, like 4 years?
Well, the whole time that you had YouTube.
The whole time. Yeah. So, like, it's just hard to remember. Whatever. Which, you know what? Honestly, if you're new here, welcome. We're gonna get on topic. Don't worry. We get there. It just... my job is to get us off topic. So...
That's true. So we start off topic.
Start off topic and we get to it. If you're watching this on... if you're listening to us on your podcast thing, subscribe. These come out every other week. Welcome to the Horn and Cauldron podcast, by the way. I don't know if I actually said those words yet.
We have not said that.
Okay, that's totally okay. We'll get there. Welcome to the Horn
and Cauldron
podcast. There we go. Hey, look at that. We're not even going to edit this. This is one take. I'm John Norgrove. This is Julie Norgrove. This is a witchy podcast for witchy folk. And we are... we do this every other week. We get a new podcast out every other Monday. It's on everything. If you're listening, please subscribe so that way you catch everything new. If you're watching us on YouTube, don't forget to like this video, comment below, share, subscribe, ring the bell, and do all that kind of stuff. If you are listening to us and you would like to see our silly looking faces while we do this, well, we're on YouTube. I think I already said that, but we're on YouTube under Nerd Jive. All the YouTube content we produce, which is 4 times a week, is Nerd Jive. If you want to hit us up on social media, literally everything, it's Nerd Jive. And we have a Patreon. So please support our Patreon.
Yep.
We, with every one of these episodes, it takes me about a week to produce it, but we have a couple of Book of Shadows pages come out for these if you want to subscribe to our Patreon channel and get really cool, arty, like eclectic Book of Shadows things, because I do like weird
and phone
graphic
backgrounds.
Design. Oh yeah, and cell phone backgrounds.
Yeah.
I make cell phone backgrounds for each one of these. If you're listening, you're not going to catch this, but like if you're on the if you're watching it on YouTube, you'll catch it. They're super dope. That is just blown the heck out. But I have them for the main label for the podcast, the main album cover for the podcast.
And for Ostara.
We have these for Ostara.
Oh,
I have them
for
for Aphrodite, and we are going to do Book of Shadows pages and cell phone backgrounds for the episodes previous. But you know, those already happened, and we're moving forward. So today we are going to learn about working with the Fae. So take it away, the person who actually knows what the heck they're talking about here. I'm just here to distract you guys and have fun.
That is true. You are distracting too.
Yeah, that's my role here. I do the talking in every other video we produce. So she does the talking in this one, and I'm just here to interject by getting us off topic and ranting about something non-corporeal.
That's pretty much what we do. So today we're talking about working with the Fae. It's springtime right now if you're listening to this when this first comes out, and that's a perfect time to learn about the Fae because really they're just kind of like getting active again. Yeah. They're around all the time, but the spring is when the Fae really start kind of like waking up from winter slumber, as it were. And you can call them the Fae or fairies or fair folk, however you want to spell that. Fae folk, with however many E's or I's and Y's you care to insert there.
R's, whatever.
All the same thing.
It's all the same thing. And let's start with, just because this has come up in a couple of previous ones, we are not experts. We are doing research on this and presenting you guys some information. We are longtime heathens and witches.
Yep.
But we're not an expert on anything. So if you have a differential opinion, comment below. Let us know. Maybe we'll respond.
Yeah. And if you like our content and would like it to get further in depth or have more information or just have more of it, definitely hit us up on Patreon because we both work full-time jobs and
we would love to do be doing like 504s on singular gods like Aphrodite, but right now we have 101s and remember a lot of this is the first time round is going to be like sort of a cursory overlook on things, and then as we circle back to these or we circle back with specificity into their genres, we will get more specific. So that's really where you're going to get the details.
We have a lot of things that we want to cover too.
We have months of episodes planned. So yeah, don't worry. It's always going to come out. It might be super late at night, but that's just because I'm crazy lazy.
Well, it's really more because we work regular full-time jobs and have lives. So.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, sometimes you get home on Sunday and you're just like, I don't want to do nothing. I'm just we're gonna wait. We'll record it on Monday after work, and I'll edit it and I'll upload it to everything. It's fine. I don't need to sleep. Sleep is for the dead.
Yeah. So anyway, we'll just get into it. So I'm primarily going to call them the fae and fairies. My preferred method of calling them something is really fae. I think it sounds cool.
Yeah.
And I usually spell it with an E.
The way that I say it, yeah.
Yeah, that's really just a personal choice there.
Yeah.
So whatever you call them, the fae are a type or several types of beings or spirits that live in harmony with nature. And they're characterized by a curious and often mischievous and sometimes malefic nature. And sometimes the term of fairies encapsulates what we would like to think of as like elementals or nymphs or brownies, not the ones you eat, goblins, pixies, gnomes, leprechauns, trolls, and even elves, depending on where you are.
I guess you could technically eat a fairy also, but that's
that would not be very nice.
I think that's how you get trapped in their
fact,
realm.
I think that
there's a bunch of rules about not eating their
that.
food. I imagine eating them is worse.
Yeah, I think that's in a movie of some sort.
Yes.
I want to say it's like Legend or something.
No.
Legend.
It's the comedy movie where he has the like minotaur dong around his neck. Oh shoot, yeah, the bad guy is like grabbing fairies out of the air and pinching their wings off
and just eating them.
And grinding them up in a mortar and pestle and snorting them like cocaine. Like magical cocaine, yeah.
I don't remember what that is.
What is that movie called? I'm actually going to look that up.
Yeah. Anyway, so fairies are usually humanoid creatures who possess magical powers, although that's really where all of sort of the generalities between stories of fairies end. There are many stories of fairies who range in size from being a few inches or even like a centimeter or a half an inch if you're using freedom.
Your Highness.
Oh, Your Highness.
Your Highness, yeah. Danny McBride, Natalie Portman, James Franco, Zooey Deschanel. Yeah, this is an all-star freaking cast, dude.
Yeah, that was horrifying.
This is a great movie.
Watching him eat those fairies. I was
up.
Super traumatized.
Yeah.
But some of these fairies are like a few inches or like a centimeter tall to those that are like about the size of a human. They're not generally larger than a human, but a lot of fairies have the ability to change shape as well, or at will. In addition to having wings, some are barefoot, some wear shoes. There's really all kinds of different deviations of what fairies are purported to look like based on stories and folk tales. But so it's really interesting because you'd think that it's more of like a tight thing, but fairies really vary a lot throughout different cultures. And of course, the culture that we're most familiar with having fairies is Celtic culture. Mm-hmm. But fairies sort
of exist in.
They've been found. There are stories about fairies in every.
And it might not be the same term.
Corner of the world.
There's always like some vaguely smaller than you asshole who has a connection to nature who's trying to fuck with you because you're doing like some dumb shit about nature. It's generally like this dude's cutting too many trees down. Well, fairies are gonna put tax in your shoes. Don't fucking cut down so many trees, asshole. You don't need them. Like that. It's generally like that kind of thing. But yeah, that is like culturally represented in every way. Fairies are sort of up there with like dragons. You might not call them dragons. Sometimes they're just like winged lizards or like winged snakes. But dragons exist in every culture, like historically to some respect. Fae folk are the same.
Yeah.
Like there's always like tiny nature tricksters here to
there's
mess your
always
shit up.
tiny nature tricksters. Yes,
Yeah.
yes. So fairies
Tree
are
hoodlums, whatever. I don't know.
tree hoodlums.
Yeah.
Maybe some of them.
Yeah, maybe some of them. That's fair.
Now, fairies are thought to live underground in a realm that's so dangerous that you can't consume food or water, like you've already mentioned. Or you can't leave. You have to stay there. It sounds awfully a lot like the Greek underworld, doesn't it?
Yeah, or, I mean, you know, a bunch of places where you're not really supposed to be, and some sketchy dudes are offering you some stuff. Like, hey man, you should totally eat this, like, sandwich, right? Doesn't it look good? You're like, alright, well, that's too much intensity about this sandwich. I'm never gonna eat again, thanks. You know what I mean?
I feel like you can't have that cursed sandwich.
Yeah, you can't have that cursed sandwich. I mean, I don't know. If it's a salami sandwich, I might take that risk. But, like, no, yeah, the like, standard issue bit on the Fae folk with regard to eating food is that you can go there to, like, plead the king of the fairy folk or what have you. Or whatever, like, your particular, like, action is for going to the fairy realm in your story from, like, ancient to modern. But the no is always to never partake of any food or drink when you're in that realm, because the food or the drink is what enchants you or curses you or enthralls you, you know, depending on, again, who you're reading and what time period you're reading it in. And that's what traps you there, where you become sort of like I've heard everything from, like, being turned into one of them to, like, simply dying there, like, so they can eat you or whatever.
Yeah.
To being enthralled, and when you leave, you're not the you that went there because you ate their food, and now you're the person in the, like, our world who's, like, moving stuff around, like, moving parts for them, you know, that style. So there's a bunch of different iterations of how eating shit over there is a no-no.
Yeah. So they live underground, and the term itself is kind of a fun one. You know, I love that, like, old word kind of stuff. So the term fairy usually means enchanted or magical, depending on the etymology of where it's coming from. And that word comes from fairy, so F-A-E-R-I-E, meaning realm of the fays. And fae is an old French word that denotes a woman who knows magic, so the power of stones and herbs and words. And some people think that the French word is partially inspired by the Germanic word fey, F-E-Y, which means fated to die. And I think maybe an amalgamation of those things helps to really cement the idea of what fairies are.
Yeah, of course, yeah. Well, and I mean, you know, anytime you're looking at something historical like this, and you're going back in time, especially, like, pre-history, or, like, sort of like anything that's sort of like pre-Christian era European or anything like that, you sort of have to think about it like the telephone game we all played as a kid, like, kind of like lines get crossed and things get changed. And if your particular understanding is something that we do not bring up, please comment below on our YouTube video so that way everybody can know, because like everything, there are a bunch of stories and not all of them can be gotten to or honestly, like, found in our first run through of researching.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And like we said earlier, we are by no means self-professed experts. We are just some people talking into a microphone / camera. Into traditions, like I said before, stories of fairies have been found in all corners of the world. All religions, all continents, all corners of the world, and they generally have a lot of the same characteristics, as in they are sort of nature spirits. They're generally smaller in stature. They are typically curious and mischievous, and it can be it can be a big thing to make a bargain with them. So you see a lot of that. But an old Christian belief is that fairies weren't quite good enough to be angels and not quite evil enough to be devils. So they sort of walk the in-between. And I really actually like that idea. I like that.
That's fun.
There are other beliefs associated with the how Christianity and Abrahamic religions view fairies, but I think that one is definitely my favorite.
Yeah, that's a fun one. I like that.
But we don't really know how old that belief goes back. It is my best guess that it goes back to about that Dark Ages time frame. We're really seeing all of that stuff change, where you're seeing the Christianization of these ancient old world religions. And since this Christian belief that they were not quite good enough to be angels, not quite evil enough to be demons, various people since then have argued that fairies are a variety of things, including evil spirits held in thrall by a sorcerer. That was very common in the early Middle Ages.
You gotta worry about sorcerers, just thralling stuff.
You gotta worry about that. Yep. And others likened them to benevolent nature elementals. In particular, fairies were sometimes called solar angels, which were little angels that lived in the sun. And they came out to help guide the life, as it were, of plants and animals.
Okay. Yeah.
And they were usually depicted as tiny little flames. So, there's really a lot of acceptance for fairies across the world. But in Scottish folklore, there is a thing called the Seelie Court, and that's Seelie. And I may not be pronouncing that in a true Scottish way. I apologize if I'm not. But the Seelie Court is something that's bled over into popular culture in a variety of ways. And essentially, the Seelie Court is all of the fairies in Scotland, or in the tradition, they have a place in the Seelie Court. So in the Seelie Court, so think of it like a king or a queen's court. You've got all these fancy people standing around in fancy dresses. So that's kind of the same idea here. So the Seelie Court was for upper class fairies, and they were fairies that liked playing mostly harmless pranks. A lot of them would ride horses as well, or tiny animals, much like
of these tiny
horses.
Dudes just hanging onto horses.
A lot of them hanging on horses.
My favorite imagery for this is the wingless fae folk, the wingless fairy riding tree squirrels. That's my all-time favorite. There's some pretty awesome paintings of fae folk, little dressed in leaves and bramble fae folk riding red squirrels, red forest squirrels and shit. I love that.
It's super fun.
Yeah, it's adorable. Yeah. I love it.
Now, when you have the Seelie Court, you also have the un-Seelie Court.
Yeah.
Which is for
the broken Seelie Court.
A little like that, yeah. It's for those fairies that are malicious to humans. So the bad boys. Yeah, not the bad boys with the heart of gold, but the
jerks.
bad guys.
Just jerks.
And then there were also a third type of fairy in Scottish folklore, and they are the trooping fairies. And these fairies live in small camps, sometimes by themselves, although that's a bit more rare, and a bit more by type. So, for instance, leprechauns are generally accepted as fairies, and those ones are usually characterized as living solitarily.
Okay.
Yeah, so trooping fairies. And trooping fairies just would troop about. They were nomadic.
So you've got Seelies, non-Seelies, and troops. Mm-hmm. Seelies, bad Seelies, and troops.
Yeah, good Seelies, bad Seelies, and nomads.
Yeah. Hermetically Seelies, broken Seelies, wanderers.
Yeah. And pretty intrinsically tied in with the fairy side of things and the Seelie Court is, I'm going to attempt to say this, and I even wrote down the pronunciation here. So I would normally say this Tuatha Dé Danann, but in learning what the pronunciation is, it looks like it's Tuatha Dé Danann?
The Tuatha Dé Danann.
Okay, so you get to say that word now.
Yeah, the Tuatha Dé Danann.
The Tuatha Dé Danann.
Yeah, the Tuatha Dé Danann.
Okay, you're mostly going to say that.
Yeah, that's fine. It's okay.
So
yeah. That's at least the way that I've always heard it pronounced, is the Tuatha Dé Danann. Yeah.
All right, well...
I don't know why. That's just the way that I've always heard it pronounced.
We'll make this a little bit
it's
audience
a Scottish Games thing. That's just the way people talk about
it. So,
the Tuatha Dé Danann.
In modern times are known as fairies. But it's very likely that pre-Christianity, these were actually deities in Ireland. And we've talked briefly about some of them
the
before.
Tuatha Dé Danann are definitely... So... It's always weird, and I was thinking about this when you were first starting the research on it. I was just like, okay, I wonder if we're gonna bring up the Tuatha Dé Danann. I also never know what the heck we're gonna talk about, guys. That's not. She knows. She's the researcher. I just have like a kind of absurd breadth of knowledge, and am here mostly for commentary. But yeah.
Mostly I like seeing what stuff he comes up with off the cuff, non-prompted.
A lot of you can find a lot of stuff that says the Tuatha Dé Danann were like fae folk, right? But you also find an equally large amount of stuff that says the Tuatha Dé Danann were gods.
Yeah.
And the like Irish fae folk, because the Tuatha Dé Danann are like Irish gods.
Yeah.
The traditional or what have you. The fae folk were like, in some ways, or in some readings, interpretations, whatever, in some of the things that I've read, the Tuatha Dé Danann and the fae folk are different people. Fae folk are like nature elemental sort of gods, and the Tuatha Dé Danann are sort of like the name and like conscience reference gods, right? The Tuatha Dé Danann have like the god of death, whereas the fae folk would have like the god of like elder trees, right? So there's like in some interpretations that's the difference, and in some the word fairy, or like the way that fairies were referred to the whole tribe of the Tuatha Dé Danann, and some of them were like big names, right? Just like when you to put this into like Greek terms, like some of the Tuatha Dé Danann are like Zeus and like big names like that, right? And I am like rapidly searching my memory for the names of these, and I don't know them that well. I know a good amount about the Tuatha Dé Danann, but I don't know like enough.
Well,
and it's not really like my practice, so it's not something that I seek out. It's just something that I've acquired endlessly because I practice in a vaguely Scottish manner with these things.
Well, the Dagda is commonly considered to be the king of the Tuatha Dé Danann.
The Dagda,
and a lot of other deities in Irish pantheon that way. But I mean, you bring up some interesting points, and the really big thing about it is most of the Irish and even Scottish and all of that sort of Germanic religion stuff was written down by Christian monks. During the Dark Ages.
It was recorded like post. It's so the, like what is and isn't true understanding and tradition with regard to like Norse mythology. We have this like logical cutoff where things changed pre-Christianity. The same thing with the Tuatha Dé Danann or the fae folk, or the Celts or the Picts or the pagans or who have you. Everywhere around the world, to be completely frank. Christianity brought like writing shit down in a way that was preservative.
Yes,
but it also like kind of vaguely tore those religions to pieces
because
and
even
picked and chose what didn't agree or disagree.
Well, even as devout as any of those monks would have been, they would have not been able to say this is what the people believe. They had to inherently take what the native beliefs and superstitions were and write them down, but in the light of a holy man reasoning them through Christianity. Because even if a monk wrote it down and someone else in the church felt that it was inflammatory or that it was heresy, they could just burn that book, never to be seen again. And then they would burn the guy. Yeah. So, there's a lot of that. So it's really not surprising to see that the Irish pantheon, the
Tuatha Dé
Danann, really were sort of like demoted, as we've seen in other examples from more Germanic religions. Yeah. And
Germanic,
really a lot of
Celtic.
them were not just made demoted in stature, so fairies are short and small, but also that they were demoted in their roles. So many of them in folklore stories passed down are described as kings and queens and other heroes, and they have magical powers. But a lot of these stories take place in disparate times in Irish folklore and in history in general. So it really gives the idea that maybe these kings and queens have immortality, much like you see with some of the beings in the Arthurian legends side of things.
Yeah. A lot of times you sort of adjust backwards into mortality, so that way it's no longer a story of Dagda, the king of the Tuatha Dé Danann, and him having to deal with some sort of a trouble, but it's like a king, and the Irish just happened to use the word Dagda for it, and he happened to be fighting some rebels about some stuff, and you sort of like bland it out enough that it just sort of becomes like historical vagary. You know, I mean, that's a fairly common practice. But you also have the other side of that.
Well, it's like the thing they say in Lord of the Rings when they're talking about the ring. It's, the story became legend and legend became myth.
Yeah, exactly.
And the myth was forgotten, that kind of thing. Like, that happens. That's a reason why they say that. But so it's hard because you don't really have a lot of, like, written down things for them, but going further backwards in time, because if you are a longtime listener of this podcast, you know that I like talking about how this would have looked in Paleolithic or Neolithic.
Okay, we're back. We got it. What's next?
Yeah. So, if you're a longtime listener of our podcast, first of all, thank you to all 2 of our listeners.
Yeah, right.
But you'll know that I really like talking about the like super ancient and like Paleolithic side of this sort of stuff. And there's not really a lot, but there are some interesting things associated with it. Some scholars believe that fairies and their ilk are actually remnants of a prehistoric era. Or a prehistoric race. So back in the Paleo or Neolithic times, they posit that what we know as fairies was actually another race that was trying to fight the people who ended up being our ancestors. And this race were shorter, and they typically lived underground. And perhaps, if you want to get a little more fun with it, they used magic to defend themselves rather than tools, which indicates they'd be no match against iron, which is a common thing to repel fairies. Or, on the flip side of that, same idea, but totally opposite in practice, that they were superior in their weaponry, and they had iron, and they were not easy for us to beat. So it's sort of that like cultural memory thing. So it's kind of interesting the way that maybe comes about, but
yeah, it's an interesting theory.
It is definitely an interesting theory. I don't know that I particularly like that quite as much, but to each his own.
Yeah, that's fair.
But the first mention of fairies is actually in the 13th century, and ever since that moment in time, fairies were popular, and they continued to rise in popularity throughout medieval times. And the depiction of fairies has evolved and sort of changed along with the needs of society for what they wanted fairies to be. But the current depiction of what you would think of in your mind's eye when you think of the word fairy is likely because that came about during the Victorian era. Thanks to authors and painters, fairies were very popular in that era. So we're really looking at like a fairly recent amount of time between what we know as fairies and when that originated, which is a lot like tarot, surprisingly. So I was expecting them to be pretty old, but there's even an origin story for fairies that was written in Peter Pan. Which was written in 1902. I do not know what that is off the top of my head, and I did not write that down.
You'll catch it next time.
Or not. Or read Peter Pan. I've never actually read Peter Pan.
Like the book?
No, I've never actually read the book.
Wow, okay. I mean, I haven't read it since I was like a wee child, but... Yeah, no, I've definitely read Peter Pan.
I didn't have
Yeah.
time. I didn't have time.
I guess.
And fairies are still common in modern pop culture in a variety of ways, aside from Tinkerbell. And specifically in Ann Arbor, Michigan, there's a thing about the fairy doors in Ann Arbor, Michigan. There are like a few dozen fairy doors on buildings, and they're usually at the very bottom of a building. Mm-hmm. And you can take like a walking tour of the downtown area for them, and I looked at all the pictures, they are adorable. There is even a little fairy door that has an ATM and a bank vault.
That's awesome.
It is so cute. I love it. And obviously this is like super popular with kids. So local children leave gifts for the fairies. So like drawings and coins and candies and shiny rocks and other things like that in hopes that the fairies will receive them. And sometimes they write little letters to the fairies and stuff. It's super adorable. So if we ever go to Ann Arbor, I definitely want to check that out. But for most of the time that the Fae have really been around, it's primarily been that people are trying to avoid them. Most stories are about cautioning the listener to beware of the Fae and to employ charms to ward them off. So some popular things are iron or bells, particularly church bells, four-leaf clovers, wearing clothing inside out, rowan trees, having them, in your home or something like that. There are some herbs that are thought to ward off fairies, as well as carrying bread. And the carrying bread one is interesting because the idea behind most of these is you carry them and it wards them off. The bread is like, in case you see one, you just like give them this bread and then you just like hurry away.
We've all seen like Bugs Bunny and shit. Listen, you carry a steak to ward off dogs. Everybody knows how this works. All male people carry steaks just in case a dog decides to get frisky. That's the lessons that I learned as a child, and I choose to believe that to this very day, that all male personnel carry just like a pocket steak, just in case there's a dog asshole. So that's my belief.
Well, the fairies were a bit more malefic.
I'll tell you what, the FedEx guys that come to the brewery are they always got a little treat for Chabo. So
I mean, that's important. You got to have treats for dogs that come your way. So I guess maybe not. But in olden times, fairies were widely known, widely accepted. That is, that they would lead travelers astray into deeper and darker parts of a forest, and they wouldn't be able to escape, or some other evil would befall them. Or into one of their fairy mounds. Fairies were also known for stealing or hiding small items, something that we personally have experience with. We'll talk about that in a bit.
Fair.
They were also blamed for sudden death among a lot of people. So if somebody died suddenly, especially if it was a child, they would be like, oh, the fairies got him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like an RKO out of nowhere.
Yeah, fairy death out of nowhere. Sudden fairy death.
Because they're RKOing people, dude. You ever receive one of those? Dead immediately.
It was also widely believed that fairies were responsible for consumption. Which was a huge thing back then.
It's the curse that steals your life force.
Yeah.
So that way they can live immortal. Yeah. I've totally read about that.
Not so much as a curse, but actually the more common way that people thought about this was that the people that had consumption were lured by the fairies, or even maybe possessed by the fairies, to go and dance round the fairy circle with them at night. And they would get no rest, so they would just waste away, because the idea was if you there's really a negative connotation. I've heard that dancing around this thing,
dancing all night, living all day, so that way you don't you never get a chance to rest, so that's why you die from exhaustion, consumption sort of a thing, especially with back then understandings of what consumption was. I was actually just thinking about reading a thing where if you ate or drank in the realm of the fairies, right, in like the underground, then no food or liquid can feed you, can sustain you in the like land of man.
Yeah.
And I remember reading something about that, so I wonder if that is also part of the connective tissue between the Fae and consumption, where within it's like, if you've partaken in, like, fairy food, then, like, human food is no longer acceptable, so your body no longer receives, like, nutrition from it, right? You know? So, there's another connection I was thinking about.
Fairies are also, were also accused of tangling hair. Especially hair of little children. You know, that's kind of a mischievous thing to do.
Yeah, Christmas tree lights.
Basically, like, can you imagine Wile E. Coyote doing it? Probably. Then that would be something a fairy would do.
Chaos theory.
Chaos theory, yeah. But probably most famously, fairies are known for stealing babies. Lots of baby stealing.
Very tasty screech fruit, a baby.
Yeah, tasty screech fruit. Comment below if you recognize that, please.
Yeah. That wasn't fairies, by the way, but yeah, if you know what screech fruit is from, hit us up. What's up, dude? You're cool. That was a great series
We'd
of
love
books.
to talk to a fellow, what is it, threftling?
Yeah, three-fifthsling.
Three-fifthsling, yeah.
Or whatever.
So fairies would steal, fairies would just like steal babies and then leave a fae folk in the baby's stead. And changelings, so these were called changelings, and they mostly had to do with kidnapping or luring humans into a trap, and then, you know, usually a tiny baby or a small child.
By way of getting
but
your baby.
sometimes full-grown adult humans were you know, sort of the targets of being a changeling.
Invasion of the body snatchers.
Invasion of the body snatchers.
Yeah.
Invasion of the fae.
Oh.
Snatchers. No, that doesn't work.
Those squid monsters from the faculty, those were fae.
Yeah.
Don't do drugs. Or, I guess technically the TLDR of that movie is do drugs, but stay in school nonetheless.
It is stay in school, do drugs.
That movie's not got a lot of great lessons. Don't worry about it.
So, why would they steal a baby, though? Or a human?
I would assume delicious baby meat, but yeah.
You know, it actually
Legit,
was,
like, I have no fucking clue.
less about eating them.
I know
and
why.
more about keeping them as slaves.
I know why trolls eat screech berries. They're very tasty, from what the trolls say.
Yeah, very tasty.
Screech berries. I wonder if there's a Captain Troll and he makes oops all screech berries. Oops all screech berries. Gods. Now I gotta make that. That would be such a great graphic. Oops all screech berries.
That would be really good.
Real Tark.
That's so bad. Okay, so changelings were often thought that the human component of the changeling was that the fairies would keep them and use them as slaves, and they would slowly waste away, which is super dark. But a lot of things.
Also, horrible return on your investment. I mean, like, feed them, dog. What are you doing?
Yeah, exactly. So part of the thing about
tricks are for kids.
Blaming fairies for things like consumption and sudden death is pretty much any time someone had like some sort of issue. So like if there was someone who was malformed or perhaps even mentally retarded, or you know, somebody just died suddenly or went missing, they would just blame it on the fairies.
Was born with a weird thing or died of a weird thing or like over time became a weird thing. The fairies was sort of like the easy blame, right?
Yeah.
You're just like fairies got that guy acting real crazy town, and you're like, I'm pretty certain it was the horse that kicked him in the head, but like, yeah, sure, fairies. You know what I'm saying? Like, it was always blame the fairies.
Always blame the fairies.
Which is probably one of the reasons why they're sassy with people.
That is, I'm sure, part of one of the reasons.
2,000 years of being unappreciated and blamed for a bunch of shit they didn't do. You know? They're like, Tom was an asshole, but like, I'm not an asshole. Whatever the hell a fairy name is. I imagine it's not Tom. But, yeah, whatever.
Well, and then, like, marginalized and romanticized.
Oh, my God, yeah.
I mean, they've even got a cereal. Do they see any of those royalties? I think not.
Or maybe, I don't know who manufactures that, so, like...
Maybe, that's true.
It could be. I mean, they've got Keebler. They own that whole company, right?
Maybe.
I don't know. Those commercials seem to argue that they do. Bloody racist commercials, what those are.
So, as it goes, fairies were so feared that people would go to really great lengths to avoid, or at the very least, not anger them. And there's a lot of evidence of that going backwards in time. People would avoid places that were considered haunted by the fairies. Any sort of, like, fairy ring or fairy hills or hillocks or that sort of thing. Yeah. You couldn't go near them. You wouldn't dig them up, you know, even if you were going to do something there.
And if you don't know what a fairy ring is, which, like, part of me is like, how could you not know? But then also part of me is just like, I probably know too much about fairies, which is whatever. So, like, that's fine. Oftentimes when you're in the woods and you're walking around, and you may have seen this before, you'll see, like, a ring of mushrooms is a very common one, which, like, from a mechanical standpoint, has to do with the way mushroom spores grow and like, seed. But you'll see, like, a ring of mushrooms, or you'll see a ring of trees, like a cathedral of trees, like a ring of trees. Which
or
is
sometimes just like a worn out path.
Yeah, a worn out like a ring of dirt, even though the rest of the forest is lush. Or like sometimes you'll see like a perfect circle of taller grass than all of the other grass. Just like in the middle of the woods, you'll just be like out in nature, and you're just like, why is that grass particularly tall and in a circle? So it's like those sort of things, you know? Or like a weird hill that's not like an anthill or something. It's just like the ground in this area is just like a little boop. You know, what's that?
Where everything else is flat.
Yeah. When everything else is flat or something to that extent.
Yeah, it's thought that the entrance to fairyland or the underworld, however you really want to call it, where fairies would live, is through those hills. And it's pretty fascinating the way that people sort of look at that. In fact, a lot of people would change where they're going to build a house depending on if they saw a fairy ring or a fairy hill.
Like nearby.
Yeah, nearby.
Yeah.
And not only would they change where they were going to build something, they would also change the design of a building or a home, you know, to make it easier for fairies to travel undisturbed, particularly with these trooping fairies, I suppose. But they would make it so that your front door and your back door were in a straight line, so that you could just open the front and back door and the fairies could just troop through undisturbed. Yeah. Because otherwise they might not know how to get out, and now they're stuck in your house. But also they would, you know, cut a corner of a building out, even existing buildings. If they felt it was too close to a fairy path, then they would just chop a corner of a building off. Or build doors where they weren't necessarily going to be. It's a very interesting design.
Fairy doors to be underneath of your house.
Yeah.
So they could pass underneath, or you know, like a fairy path along the like footing of the house, or if you had a particularly extensive garden, potentially planting like a fairy patch, like a patch of like a row of flowers or what
path.
have you.
Yeah.
You know, a path for them to walk down. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so most of what we know about fairies is trying to not make them angry. Now, we did talk about carrying bread, but people also commonly carried cream or butter on their person to give to a fairy if they found them in their path. And I just like think about that. I'm just like, how are you going to be carrying butter with you?
Well, I mean,
or like cream. Like,
in my mind, it's the same way that my sister carries around like caramels or something. Like
her husband's hypoglycemic.
Like old lady caramels for her husband who's hypoglycemic, and I totally get that, by the by. But like to me, it's like one of those kind of things. They just have like little like tinfoiled wads of like just like
candy.
Yeah, just like get out of here with that.
I was thinking of it a little bit more like a bandolero. Like you've got like a pop
Maybe
a cylinder of butter out, and give it to the fae.
There's like one of those change county like belt things from the 80s, so you can like count out quarters and nickels and dimes and such. So they're just like, that look at the fairies like a 2 flowers of butter and a cream over here.
Yeah, right. We'll give you like a little mini muffin and just a little tiny pat of butter.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of these old-timey traditions about the Fae are not what I've experienced. I have been working with the Fae since I was a very small child. And I have never had issues with them. And a lot of the negative connotation surrounding them is, in my opinion, unwarranted. But you have to understand how to work with them. And we, in the house that we live in now, actually work with the Fae quite closely. We have a lot of nature spirits where we live, and the Fae are very active here. And we make them a part of our life, and we live in a harmony here in the woods. Have you worked with Fae before we lived here?
Before we lived here? Yeah. Maybe not in so named a way, but
capital F.
Yeah,
thing.
not necessarily in like a capital F, or like I'm calling it like I'm calling Bill up because my garden needs some help or something. It's nothing so formal. But certainly, I mean, I grew up in Sonoma, so I grew up in a significantly more rural than than it even is now, sort of a situation. And I always grew up like, sort of playing outdoors. I mean, 90s kids, we lived in a different time, better time, different time, less internet, let me tell you that. But,
it was even less growing up in the 80s, let me tell you.
Yeah, that's fair. Better jackets though, very loud. But no, yeah, I've definitely like, I don't know, for me, it's just been like one of those like omnipresent things. Right? Like, regardless of, and even before I began down the path that I currently walk with regards to, like, practical faith, and, like, religion and understanding and such like that, there was always an element of, like, even when I was practicing Catholic, there was always an element of, like Mother Nature has its own spirits and its own dinings and danings or whatever the fuck. And it's just, it's doing its thing. So it's sort of always, I don't know, it's sort of always been there for me. I mean, it's a little bit more capital F Fae now that we live here, but it's always been, for years and years and years, I've always been the guy that's just like, I talk to my tomato plant the same way I talk to my dog, which is the same way I talk to fucking a regular person. I talk to everything like a regular person. So that's just, if my car's not working, I talk to my car that way. If I'm having to do some stuff with like a tree, like cut a tree down or trim a tree back or whatever, I talk to it in the same way. That's just like the way that I've always been. I don't know what that is. For me, like everything has exactly the same amount deserves the same amount of respect as everything else. Like if you're an asshole, I'm not going to give you respect, you're an asshole. But like, I'm not going to be like a dick to a tree or something. That's not cool.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's just, that's just like not my vibe.
People are, and people do those things.
Yeah, obviously.
I mean, I grew up in the city, and I do remember working with fairies, although I wouldn't necessarily say like magically working with fairies, like I wasn't casting spells and asking fairies to do things for me, it was, but I definitely did. I was definitely aware of them, and they were aware of me, and we did a lot of things. I used to make little like avatars for the fairies when I was a kid, and I would take wire and bend it into little people shapes, as children often do, and would clothe them. First, I started trying to clothe them in little fabric straps and things I found around the house, and they didn't like that, and they would get rid of them. But as I sort of figured out what they liked, I found that they really liked the being clothed in flowers, particularly the fake flowers that my mom kept up in the attic. Yeah. So when I was a kid, I used to sneak up into the attic and take fake flowers and clothe them in fairies. And I don't know that my mom ever knew. I don't even think she listens to this podcast.
Yeah,
if
so
hi Mom.
Never know.
Sorry. But that's really what they liked. And, they would move little figurines around and whatnot, and I would leave them outside and stuff. So I've been working with them for a long time, and I have found that, yes, the Fae do have a very curious nature.
Yeah.
They want to... They seek to know and to understand and experience.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, for me as a kid, it was a lot of, my dad and I talk about this all the time. There's sort of like two different kind of people when we always refer to G.I. Joes. When my dad was young, he played with G.I. Joes. When I was young, I played with G.I. Joes. It's like a family thing. Also, the G.I. Joes cartoon was just the fucking best. I love that cartoon so much. Go Joe. Legitimately, like, I would get a G.I. Joe tattoo. Like, no questions. I love that show. It was so formative to my existence. But like, there's sort of like Dad and I always talked about it as there's like kind of two kind of kids when you play with your G.I. Joes, right? There's the kids who are like have the dolls in their hands and they're like bah, 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 and they're like talking and they're like playing action. And those are the kids who build like elaborate set pieces and then place their G.I. Joes all correctly, and then they're just like, that's tight, right? And that was me as a kid. Was like building like forts and stuff, and I mean G.I. Joe's is just a very specific example of that. But like, I mean, hell, I even do it now, right? I mean, we needed like when winter came, because we have like bird seed and like a bird bath out for the just innumerable number of fucking birds that live in our area, and when winter came, we had to like move where that stuff was, and it needed to be covered. So I built like a little, like, covered, it's nice, it's like real pretty, it's decorated up and shit area for the birds who, like, if there's any winter birds or like squirrels or what have you who need a little bit of stuff during the winter time, we have a little thing on our property for that. And like, for me, it's always, I love building like tiny houses and or like tiny fairy gardens like underneath some shit. That was like, I loved doing that as a kid when you could like, there'll be like a bush and you can like trim back some like dead bramble and like build like a little hidden town or whatever underneath some bushes or into the side of a hill or shit. Like that was my jam. You know, I mean, I've told you about when we were kids, we would go to the beach and like everybody builds sandcastles, right? But we did this thing where me and my brother and my sister would build a sandcastle like right at the edge of the water, and we would, as we built it, fight the water back to save our kingdom. And sometimes it would be like an all-day thing where we like built a castle and like the tide's coming in and like the ocean's trying to invade our kingdom, and we're like digging trenches and waterways and shit and redirecting earth. Like it was just a thing that we always did as kids. Was we always like built like little homes and stuff. And I'll tell you what, it was never one of those like build it and then blow it up. It was always like, build it. All right, well, that's cool. And then I'm just going to go build something else up somewhere else. Yeah. And that's there until it's no longer there. I just left a bunch of weird fairy houses all over Sonoma County.
I also built a lot of weird little, like, fairy houses and things like that. And I kind of think that it's, like, you know, maybe a part of, like, growing up is that you get, as you get bigger, you get like a little obsessed with things that are small.
That's entirely plausible. But, certainly.
Yeah. So I would say that fairies definitely have a curious nature, but there are some things that you do want to keep in mind if you want to work with the fairies, and that's not just that they're curious, but also that they're very literal. They're very tit for tat. If they do something for you, you now owe them a favor, or you have to do something of approximately perceived equal value for them. It's not, they don't do things pro bono, as it were. They also don't really like haggling or bargaining for something, so you can't say, do this for me and I'll do this for you, and then you don't do the thing, and then you bargain to say that you did something that was similar even though it wasn't the thing you did. You can't do that with them. But also they don't really like having thank yous, because what they're perceiving is an equivalent exchange. So in our modern society, we say thank you to people a lot. for a lot of different things, you know. So you bring me a drink from the kitchen and I say thank you, and you know, you go to a coffee shop and you get a coffee and you give that person money to make you a thing and bring it to you, and you still say thank you, and that's considered polite. But to the Fae, that's considered a little bit more patronizing. They don't really like that as much. So it's sort of a hard thing to break living in modern society, where we are so conditioned to say thank you to people, even when it's something that is expected as a result of whatever the interaction is that you're having.
Yeah.
So you really want to stay away from that. So you want to keep that in mind if you're working with the Fae. Is not that they are gonna get you, but that they have sort of a code of ethics that they live by. And you know what? They're not humans. So you have to keep in mind with them that as you work with them, that they're not going to work the same way that we do.
Yeah, exactly. Go.
So if you want to work with the Fae, the first thing that I would say to do is to get to know them. You know, they're just like getting to know a person. You know, you want to get to know them before you want to really start doing substantial magical work with them. And what I have found works is to just sit a while and meditate. So I would recommend that you bring some sort of a sweet, like a cookie or some candy or something. We're not talking like full on meal, but something like, you know, like a little treat.
Yeah.
And something to drink. And, you know, just sort of sit in the place that you would like to work with the Fae. That can be in your home. That can be in your backyard or your front yard. That can be in a park. It can be in your car. It can be wherever it is that you want. Whatever place it is that you feel is going to work the best for that, do it. I do recommend that if you can, do it out in nature. By relative population, you'll have much more luck in nature, and sort of like the further out you go, the more luck you're going to have.
Yeah, sure. Of course.
And just meditate, sit for a while, open yourself up to them. You know, in that you would like to get to know them, and see how they feel about you and see how you feel about them. It is likely that in the beginning they will be cautious and reserved, and you may sort of feel them or see them peek at you from afar. And after doing that meditation, you may immediately come to this sort of moment where you're like, yes, let's do this, and you've found some Fae that you really connect with. But it may take a while, and you may notice that they sort of follow you around because they want to get to know you, because they are very shy, but they also want to know. It seems to me personally that they've been hunted a pretty extremely, and are still hurt from that sort of thing in a cultural sense. Mm-hmm. So once you kind of get to that place, you know, you can really feel more free to work with them. But it is something that is very important that when you embark into working with the Fae, that you keep in mind that you don't just ask them to help you with things. They're not like a patron deity in a way. You want to spend time with them, and you want to hang out. You always want to leave a food or drink offering. Think of it a bit more like hanging out with a friend. And not every time you hang out with a friend you have food and drink, but that would be considered someone who is a gracious host.
Yeah, so, I mean, you know, it's... And this applies, honestly, to pretty much everything. But, like, if your friend was a person who just every time they called you, they were asking for help, inevitably it's going to be taxing on that friendship, right? And you're not going to want to help them. Right, or you're going to want to help them at, like, a bare minimum threshold, right? So it's the same thing. I mean, it's not... Magic isn't manipulation, and the Fae folk aren't a people to be controlled, right? If you've lost something and you're asking the Fae to help you find something, then, like, literally think about it like as if you fucking broke something on your car and you're calling a friend up to come over and help you rebuild that thing on your car. Or like, hey, we're moving, can you help me move? Or like, hey, we're you know, we're painting the living room. Can you help me paint the living room? You know, like you're calling a friend or whatever. And all of us have been on both sides of that equation, you know. And you know the way that you feel when that friend that only calls you up when you need to help them or answer a question for them calls you up, and you're just like, ugh. Like, you help them, but it's a little bit less, like, cool, because that's all they do is want help from you or, like, answered questions or whatever the heck. Compared to, like, the friend that you always hang out with and is, like, super chill and whatever and helped you with some stuff, and, like, you've helped them with some stuff and it's all cool, and, like, they're like, hey, man, like, I'm moving this weekend, can you help out? And you're just like, yeah, man, of course. Like, let me rearrange some shit and you know, like, clear some time on a Saturday or what have you. So, like, think about it that way, but also, like, remember, you can ask for a thing and be doing all the right stuff, and they're just like, nah, I don't really want to move in the middle of July on a Saturday for, like, room temperature Coca-Cola and fucking pepperoni pizza. You just, like, it's not worth it.
A real life offering that we have given.
Yeah, you're just like, that's dope, and I like you, but that sounds awful. Right, I mean,
like, I'm not into it.
Yeah, I get it. No. Like, I have been the offeree and that which is being offered to, with regard to, like, hey, can you help me move this thing on the hottest day of the year, just in the sunlight?
And it's always the hottest day of the year too.
I don't know that I want to be outside in the sunlight. I think I've decided to just forgo being alive for a little while. Maybe you catch me on, like, a Tuesday or something. This Saturday seems like I'm just gonna lay underneath the house in the dark. With the spiders, because that shit seems nice, because it's too goddamn hot out. But, you know, it's just, so think about it that way. Like, really, you're not trying to, like, manipulate some people or, like, get some stuff. You're trying to, like, befriend some motherfuckers that just happen to live around you. Yeah. Right? It's like being friends with your neighbor. If all you're doing is going over there, ask for a cup of sugar or a lawnmower, I mean, inevitably that guy's going to be like, hey, buddy, get the fuck out of my property.
Yeah.
But if you guys are, like, cool and having barbecues together and shit, then, like, if you need a lawnmower or they need your hedge trimmers or whatever, it's like, who fucking cares?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So that's really what you're trying to do with this, is, like, foster a relationship. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah, and you don't want them to feel like, you don't want to, in your workings with the Fae, for them to feel like they're doing more for you than you are for them. Mm-hmm. Just as you wouldn't with a regular friendship. So think of this think of working with the Fae as a friendship that you are working to build, rather than a servitor or a deity who is helping you either because you have ensorcelled them or out of their own goodness of being whatever kind of deity they are. They want sort of an equivalent exchange.
Think about Full Metal Alchemist. There's the law of equivalent exchange. You can't just transmute your mom out of a pile of rocks. We all saw what happened. You can't just transmute, I don't know, happiness out of a dog and a little girl. I don't know what the plot of that one was.
Oh man, every time you bring up the dog and the little girl, it's so dark.
You can't just do that. You gotta pay the piper. Yeah. So you know, like, do it.
Yeah, now I have to send a text message to a friend of the dog and the little girl, because every time it comes up, I have to.
That's fair.
Text them. You know who you are.
Yeah.
So that is our experience with working with the Fae. Just pretty briefly. So we're going to get into some correspondences next, because you know how much I love those correspondences. And then we're going to do some spells. And just as a reminder, the Book of Shadows page that we're going to have on our Patreon and someday for download on our Etsy shop is going to have a breakdown of all of the things that we have talked about, as well as the full correspondence list, which I don't necessarily read on air because it's a lot of things to list off.
So many things sometimes.
Every time he sees the correspondence list, I see his eyes get a little bigger.
Yeah. I gotta fit all that on a bloody page. Dude, listen, sometimes, no big deal. Sometimes I'm just like, all right, well, now that I've got this all laid out, I gotta change everything because this correspondence list is
so many,
fucking enormous, but cool.
There's a lot of things. And also the spells. So the Book of Shadows pages that we have on our Patreon and will eventually have on our Etsy are 2 pages, and they are
it's available as a 2-page PDF, and it's I brought one over to my brother-in-law, and he was just like, give it to me. I actually got to bring him my second one, because I forgot the last time we were over there. But Yeah, so it's a two-page Book of Shadows, so front and back, and the front is a summarization of all the things we go over in this podcast, as well as the completed list for correspondences, and then the back of the page is our 2 spells, and I'm putting spells in quotes for those who are listening and can't see my hands doing tiny quote signs, or hear them just cracking uproariously because I have horrible joints. My hands are loud as shit when I move them. It's very concerning. But don't type all day is the lesson there. But yeah, so we call them spells. Sometimes they're lessons, sometimes they're recipes, sometimes they're spells. But either way, they're there to infuse magic into your life.
That's right. That's right.
So
correspondences.
Go to correspondences.
Let's go.
Go to correspondences.
So we've got animals are up first. So you're thinking about most small animals. We're talking about chipmunks and fireflies, squirrels. Frogs are also commonly seen as being ridden by fae folk most of the time.
Anything that's small and that you could put a tiny saddle on.
Yeah, like a mouse or a rabbit.
Think tiny saddles. And then whatever's
tiny
artistic.
Saddles. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So you're looking at all of those. As far as colors, really any color works, but fairies are particularly attracted to shades of green or yellow or brown.
Yeah.
But
natural colors.
Yeah, natural colors.
Flowers and plants and dirt.
Yeah.
Earth.
The
nice way to Earth. Welcome to it.
Yeah.
We're Earth, welcome to it. That's what Yoda says.
That is not what Yoda says.
It's when he punched that alien in the head after crashing his F-15 or whatever.
That was Will Smith.
Will Smith, Yoda, same placing.
Totally different people. Totally. Is Idris Elba what would happen if Yoda and Will Smith get squished together?
I don't know if that makes any sense. No.
No, I'm not.
That's
we heard
that
recently
Tuvix logic is absurd.
Somebody say that Idris Elba is the thinking man's Will Smith, and I've been thinking about that since we heard that.
Yeah, it affected our lives in a very permanent way. So
yeah.
That's
anyway, stones and crystals. So these are known to particularly work well with the fae. Although honestly, anything that's pretty and shiny will work. They are not hard to please, guys. So emeralds, fuchsite, which is a brilliant pink, if I recall right.
Fuchsite. So yeah, I mean, I would imagine it's just pink rock. Fuchsite literally just means pink rock.
Yeah,
I would imagine.
Yeah. Moss agate, quartz crystal, and starlight.
Beautiful piece of moss agate back there.
And those are particularly coveted by the fae. As far as plants, most flowers. Lots of plants, a lot of trees. But in particular, the fae really seem to like berries or other sort of thorned things that have food like that in big, wide petals. Clover, columbine, cowslip, foxglove is particularly potent. Daisy, rowan is sacred to fairies, as well as wood sorrel, which also looks like clovers. Some people know it as sweetgrass.
Yeah.
We live in the
shit
forest.
Grows fierce up here.
We
live in the
we have
redwoods.
A lot of wood sorrel.
Yeah, we got crazy wood sorrel. Very beautiful. Also very tasty.
Very beautiful, very tasty. Actually, quite good for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So foods. We've already talked about bread.
Makes a good ice cream.
It does. Yeah. We've already talked about bread. So bread, butter, cakes, candies, cream,
Cake is
fruit,
just a kind of bread.
milk, honey, teas. They also like. I found that the fae particularly like seltzer drinks. Like they like the fizzy water.
Fizzy bubbly.
Yeah, you really want to. They're not so much into meat. They really prefer to have something that's like sweet. You know, think of something that you would have at like high tea, and that's what a fairy is going to want. Something that's sweet, a lot of fruit happen in there.
Yeah. Beer.
They like liquor a lot.
Yeah.
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 As for deities, since fairies are in a way sort of deities, there aren't a whole lot of deities that you could really say are associated with them, other than ones that tend to be sort of like maybe the leaders of a fairy squad.
Yeah, leaders of a fae folk,
Yeah.
or deities that have been sort of weirdly intertwined with fae legend in order to sort of like non-magicify the history of that tale, to be recorded by like a priest.
Yeah, so
later
obviously
on,
the...
thousands of years later. So there's the Tuatha Dé Danann.
Thank you.
Right. Obviously.
As we look into other cultures, there are other deities that are similar to that. In particular, Dionysus was associated with fairies. Morgan Le Fay from Arthurian side of things in Avalon, and even in other cultures. And there are words that I can't pronounce, so stay tuned for that correspondences list, guys. And there are other symbols as well. So the Fae pretty much like anything that's shiny. So coins are really nice for them, or any other sort of like shiny trinkets.
Yeah, precious metals, less precious metals, but that are like super shiny.
Yeah. Old jewelry.
Yeah, definitely.
Especially like earrings that you're missing one, or a necklace that's broken or something like that.
If you're missing an earring, that's
not that
probably
they like things that are broken and janky, but they're shiny and they're pretty and they're small.
Yeah.
So toadstools also, especially if they're in a fairy ring of toadstools.
Yeah.
Or mushrooms. Old trees. Old gnarly trees they like to live in, very specifically. Small caves or like little foxholes. We have lots of those.
Yeah, dude.
Here.
Yeah, we got a lot of those here.
Natural springs. Tiny doll houses and other miniature objects.
Yeah. Come upon a dollhouse in the woods. Just walk away from that fucking dollhouse.
God, that would be horrifying.
Yeah.
And now I feel like we need to have a dollhouse in our yard.
Yeah, but then I have to make one out of wood, and I'm very busy.
That's fair.
Yeah.
We'll put that.
Inevitably, it'll happen.
We'll just put a pin in that.
Yeah.
But also
there are tales of the dollhouses in the woods.
Yeah.
You know, you like come upon a dollhouse and like pass out, and then all of a sudden you wake up in front of a giant castle.
Yeah.
You know, and are like invited in, and the king's trying to serve you food, and it's just like you probably shouldn't eat this shit. You know.
Don't. Yeah. If you wake up in a strange land, don't eat the food.
Yeah,
man.
don't eat the food, man. Don't trust.
I mean, if you went to
food.
that land on purpose, like you eat that food. But if you didn't on purpose go to that place, that's on you.
Still high risk.
So aside from that, they also like dancing and picnics and parties and just having a good time. Fairies are really associated with springtime during the year, but they're really around all the time of the year. Yeah. They do sort of go into like a weird semi-hibernation in the winter when everything's cold and rainy, but honestly, I think they're just sort of
like hunkered down in the warm place.
Yeah.
Also, there are like winterized fairies.
Yes. Yeah.
One could argue Santa's elves, but that's neither.
Actually, Santa is sometimes considered a fairy.
Yes,
which is fun.
Very not sometimes. Yeah. Very commonly, Santa Claus is considered a fairy. Yeah. Just like a particularly large, particularly like enthralled by humans.
Yeah.
Fairy. And he's just using like elves or gnomes or whatever for his for his helpers. Although sometimes those are also fairies, and that's just like a weird thing that you kind of glance over in a movie.
Yeah, it's just like a fairy is like a weird, all-encompassing.
It's a very catch-all term for like magical folk.
Yeah, small magical folk.
Yeah.
But they're also associated with Samhain, which is in October if you are in the northern hemisphere, and if you are in the southern hemisphere, it is in May, I believe. And they're also associated with Beltane. And Beltane happens right about the time of my birthday, and I think that might be one of the reasons why I've been so attracted to Fae my whole life. And boy, do they have a rollin' good time.
Yeah.
At a birthday party.
Yeah.
So that is it for correspondences. And we got a couple of like fun spells for you guys.
Yeah, fun little Fae action stuff. So let's get into those.
Yeah. So the first one is really more of a crafting type of thing than it is a sort of ritual thing. So if you want to attract the Fae and have a place for them, you're first going to want to create a small face, aka a fairy garden, near a window or outside if you can. If you can't, do what you can with what you've got. Cool. But ideally, you want it to be somewhere in the nature. Collect items from the correspondence list or just that you think that the Fae would like. And be sure to include a small plate or like a table or some other sort of flat surface that you can put food on, as well as a tiny cup or a shot glass. Just sort of depends on what you've got available and what you can do. You can go out and buy all that stuff. You can use what you've got at home. They are not picky. We are not picky. You do not need to be picky.
If you want to be picky, that's fine. I mean, don't force it on other people. But you can be picky. That's on you, dog.
Yeah, so you're going to, create your little fairy space. It by no means needs to be finished. But go ahead and create your space. And when you are done, put on some uplifting music. Or while you're doing it, put on some uplifting music. Yeah. Something that you could like dance to or sing along to. It can be whatever it is
learn
that you
a jig, learn a slow air. You know,
could
sing
do that
along.
too.
I know a great many Scottish and Irish jigs. Just sing and hum along, make your little craft, and whistle while you work. We've all seen the movies.
Yeah, exactly. And then once you feel like you're done for the moment, place a small meal or like a snack and a drink on the flat surface. So again, take a look at that correspondence list. I would just go with something simple like a muffin with like some butter spread on it, or a piece of toast with butter and jam, and a small drink. Doesn't have to be alcoholic. Could even just be as plain as water on there. And
fresh fruit, edible flowers, single malt whiskey. That's my go-to working with the Fae. Fresh fruit, edible flowers, single malt whiskey. Specifically Scotch, but that's just because I'm Scottish and I prefer Scotch. But yeah, always works. They love that. They love all that shit. Let me tell you what, we've had a couple of outdoor altars like cleared overnight.
Yeah.
Like,
I really like
very cleared.
I find that they really like bread with jam.
Oh yeah, jam bread, always
ice
good.
Cream and candy, and I usually try to give them an herbal tea or a fizzy water or some sort of sweet liquor type of drink. Yeah. So once you've got that, you want to make sure that's enough for you to take.
A handful of Skittles.
Ooh, jeez. I mean, if that's where you're gonna go,
you get party wild. Those are like SoCal fairies.
Those are fun ass fairies. So you want to make sure that you have enough for you to take a bite of, as well as some to leave for the Fae. So whenever you're leaving an offering, always try to have something for you to take a small bite or a small sip of. So once you have your music on, your thing made, you got your food there, now place 7 candles of any color or in a circle, either around this space, around your room, or whatever. If you don't have 7 candles, it does not matter. That is totally okay. But 7 candles, recommended. You want to have all the other lights off. Basically, you want to create a nice ambiance. And from here, you're going to cast your circle, because it is important that when you are working with elemental spirits, such as Fae, that you do cast a circle to ensure that you are appropriately protecting your space.
Yeah, so you're not getting like fucked with or whatever. Yeah. Also, if you don't have 7 candles, this is a thing that, man, I don't know, I read like eons ago. And sometimes I'll do, if I'm setting up a modular space and I just have like a all natural altar cloth or whatever, is if you have one, you get like just one small candle to keep in your like kind of go altar kit and drip wax in the
Oh yeah, that would totally work
in the
too.
7 around.
Yeah.
And it's because you just like, for me, it's you want something that represents the fire of a candle.
Yeah.
And like a melted wax strip represents that fire.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of ways sort of like around, if you don't have an incense, you can like blow in that particular cardinal direction associated with air and the wind and such. So I mean, if you want to be specific, but there's also like, you can always work around. When in doubt, there's always a solution.
That's true, especially when it comes to magic.
Absolutely. Yeah, everybody's got different opinions. That's what makes it interesting. That's why we all share.
Yeah.
Sharing is caring. We learned that in like kindergarten, guys. Come on. Keep it up.
So you've got your circle, you got everything all set up, you got your candles lit or whatever you're representing as candles, and now it's time to like get down to business. So you want to say, here's something that you want to say, but feel free to make it your own within reason. So say, fair folk, I invite you to join me this whatever time of day it is. And that's it. And then you take a small bite of the meal and a tiny drink, and then leave that alone, and then proceed with whatever magical working you were already thinking about doing. So were you going to do a jar spell? Keep doing that jar spell.
Yeah.
Were you going to do some other sort of spell or ritual? Go ahead and do that. Didn't have something planned? That's okay too.
Yeah, you could just do this and like hang out for a little bit, like have dinner or whatever.
Do some meditating.
I've like legitimately done this where we've just like
do some art
during the summertime, just like barbecued and like set up a little thing and like just ate dinner outside with the dogs and then like came inside and watched TV for the rest of the night and we were done. And you know, you can just like 100% you can just chill. Again, like friends, you don't always need to like do a task with them. Sometimes you can just hang out. You know?
Yeah, and fairies are fairly curious about humans and what it is that we do, so they would really enjoy watching you do a thing. Yeah. So if you've got a thing to do, go ahead, but you could even just watch TV. But I would recommend that you do something that's a little bit less electronically focused.
Oh, sure, certainly.
For this kind of thing. And then once you're done, say, thank you for joining me this, whatever time of day it is. I have enjoyed your company and look forward to seeing you again. And then after that, go ahead and extinguish the candles, close your circle.
Yeah.
Now, you can obviously change that wording within reason, but you don't need to get too much more flowery than that, because once you really kind of deviate from this sort of thread of what you're saying to them, then you start getting into territory where you're asking them to come back. You really want to make it more of like an open
or you're
invitation.
making the thanking too much of a like, oh, like, thank you so much. And, you know, I mean, think of them like, and we've all had like a friend or a family member who's like not great with accepting adulation.
Yeah,
and they're sort of the same way in, you know, from our observations, obviously. But, so you want to take into consideration like how, you know, like you're not like going overboard. With that.
Yeah, you don't want to be too much because nobody likes a needy person like that.
Yeah, don't be
so yeah. So now, if you want to work with the Fae often, just leave that fairy space you created up and add to it from time to time. If you only want to work with them every once in a while, of course you can still leave that up. But leaving it up sort of gives them the feeling that they are welcome here and they can just kind of like come and hang out if you want them and have invited them to come and hang out. Yeah. So it's a bit more of a welcoming environment. So you could take that stuff down.
I had a brick Stonehenge in front of Dad's condo. Yeah. I made for like a while. I made a brick Stonehenge in the little tiny front yard. Yeah. And
from time to time, you might find that the Fae will, as you work with them, will leave you small objects. Yeah. And they typically will leave these in your path, although sometimes you'll find them in your home.
Yeah, or like just hole on your altar, but sometimes you'll just find it in your path. Let me tell you what, I found like an OG Zima bottle one time. Yeah. Walking through the woods, I don't know what the heck I was even doing. I think I was just like collecting branches or something for another project, and I'm just like, what's this piece of glass doing here? Right? And I like dig it out of the dirt a little bit, and it's just like just a whole Zima bottle in a place that we've lived in this house for several years now, and like we've definitely walked, and I'm just like, this is a whole fresh looking, like the blue Zima label was still like legible and unrotted on it. Yeah. Like, yeah, real nice.
And sometimes you'll find that things are missing.
Wow.
The Fae do sometimes
tools. I'm pretty certain the Fae have a fucking empire of number 10 sockets, if you catching my drift.
Oh, they definitely do. They must like to use them as like little chairs or something.
I don't know, man. I don't know what that is.
Little small things. Most of the time when the Fae are taking something from you that is of value to you, then they will return it. They're just sort of playing a joke. I use I don't use this brand, but I use a Diva cup, like a menstrual cup, and I only have one. And one time they just like hid it from me, and I couldn't find it, and I'm searching and searching and searching.
And it always goes in the same bloody place too.
It always goes in the same place in the same way at the same time, and I had to kind of like sit down in front of my altar and go like, guys, we've had a really great time recently, and I need you to bring back the thing that you took. And left, and then did something else, and then after dinner, it was sitting in the middle of our kitchen floor. Yeah. Where it was not previously sitting. There is no way that it could have ended up otherwise. So they thought that was pretty funny. And it must have been having me going around and searching through drawers and
Yeah.
places and whatnot. So, do know that there is some things that will happen or could happen when you work with the Fae. But most of the time, they want to leave you little trinkets. And you can, of course, leave them trinkets as well. It is wise that if they leave you a gift, a trinket, a little tchotchke of some sort, whatever that thing is, that you put it somewhere nice.
Yeah.
Like if they bring you a shiny rock, put that on your altar.
Yeah, don't just drawer the rock. Like, don't be an ass.
Yeah, like if your friend gave you a thing, you're gonna be like, thank you so much, and you're gonna, take care of it.
Yeah,
just
totally.
like that. Yeah, so that one is attracting the Fae. That one's a super fun one, and when I was writing this, I was like, ooh, I so want to make a fairy garden right now.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
we're gonna definitely do that.
So we're gonna definitely do that.
Definitely gonna do that. All right, well, let's get to the next spell thingy.
Yeah. So since Fae are known for being mischievous and for hiding things, they're also known for helping you find things that have been lost,
Yeah.
whether they took them or not.
Fair.
Yeah. So if you've got a lost object that you want help finding, go ahead and light preferably a black or green candle. Although if you don't have black or green, go ahead and do whatever you, can do. And if you can't do candles, go ahead and, do something else that represents light.
Yeah. I was just looking. I was like, I have purple and red.
Yeah.
Oh, and I guess I got natural beeswax.
We do have, yeah.
I got beeswax, purple, and red.
Yeah, they're not going to see the color of a candle and be like, that's not the right color of a candle. Nor are they even going to care if it's not a candle. So,
Actually, they might have wax dye still.
So if you don't have a candle, go ahead and use whatever you think makes the most sense. If you have a tiny lamp, this would actually be a great thing to do if you had like a salt lamp, because those are kind of fun to like scramble around. Yeah. So go ahead and light.
Or if you just have like a LED lamp that's like RGB.
Yeah.
Choose green. I mean, that's what we have for these lights here. That's what we have: teal, purple, and pink.
Yeah.
For our 3 colors. Also, those are like my 3 favorite colors.
So go ahead and light a black or a green candle, preferably in the afternoon or at dusk. And that's because the fairies like to party, and they like to party at night. So, it would be nice to get them after they've woken up and before they're ready to have fun. So you're really kind of looking at that time. Although there's no specific thing that says you have to do it during these times. So if the morning works better for you, go ahead. I'm not going to police you on that. Place a coin or other shiny trinket that you are okay with parting with in front of this candle, in addition to a small offering of food and drink. So once you're there, you can go ahead and cast your circle if you wish to do so, and clear your mind and say, "Fair folk, my friends, I have lost item and cannot find it. Can you please find it and return it to me? In exchange, I'll give you that item that you put there." And then that's it. So leave the candle burning until nighttime if you can, as sort of a waypoint for them to be able to locate it. And if the Fae are able to find the item, they will put it in your path. You will find it. But if they are not able to find it, or if they just don't feel like it, you may never see it again. And of course, this is to be said, if you lost, if it's like one of those things where you're the person who got proposed to on the boat in Maui, those videos where the ring drops into the ocean, they're not going to find that, guys. Be reasonable.
Well, or at least it's statistically unlikely that they will. I mean, you never know when you go to the beach and something washes up on shore.
That's so true. That's so true.
But it's statistically less likely, and at the same time, I mean, if you lost a fucking diamond engagement ring and you're like, "I'll give you this dope shell I found," they might be like, "Isn't it just asking me to find a fucking diamond ring for a shell? Fuck this guy." So again, treat everybody like people.
Yeah.
I don't know how I can say this more times. Also, yes, you want the candle to burn for as long as you can. If there are safety ramifications in your place of burning candles where within it is unsafe for you to do that, don't.
Because we have to talk about fire safety every time.
Fucking don't.
Yeah.
Let it go. It's fine. I got a bunch of candles. I got a little 5-finger candles back here. Rarely ever light it because it's like a little close to the edge of the shelf, and I'm just like kind of not. It's not super safe, so I'm not gonna do that. I mean, it's fine. I literally light them when I want to, but it's just sort of one of those things where it's like you don't want to take the risk. Don't mess with fire. That shit burns, and you people tend to burn quite easily. So don't do it.
Well, and things also tend to burn quite easily too.
Yeah.
So
like, be careful. Don't have like drapes and all kind of fuzziness around it.
Practice some fire safety here. If you're not able to keep an eye on the candle, or you cannot use the candle, or you don't feel comfortable doing it, then don't. Do something else.
Use one of them. You know what, man? Use one of them bloody LED candles.
Those are really cool. I like them.
They're very cool. They're very cool, and you can get them in all sort of colors. You can get them in RGB, so you can program them as such. Like, do that. There's nothing wrong with that. You know what? Do that. Get one of those RGB. I've actually thought about doing this, like, recently, because I do a bunch of resin stuff. It's like, get those RGB candles and, like, decorate them up so you have, like, a dope altar candle, but you don't have to worry about, like, fire and none of that shit.
Yeah, exactly.
And also, you don't have to replace it. I'm gonna be very real with you. I make my own damn candles, and it's still fucking expensive.
Oh, it's a lot of work to make our own candles.
And it's a lot of work, but, like, I have candle molds, and I have, like, 3 different kinds of bloody wicks, and I've got, like, 3 different kinds of wax for the candles, and I got scents, and I got colorants, and I got glitters, and I got additives, and I got all the stuff to make every kind of candle you can imagine. And sometimes I get on a kick and I make a bunch of candles and I, like, give them away to friends and stuff, and sometimes I'm just like, I'm just gonna buy these. I'm gonna buy this multi-pack of red candles from the Asia Mart in town because they got like the best red candles for the price.
Best candles.
You know, so I buy candles from them all the time. But so, like, yeah, definitely, like, be safe, be fire safe. We're from California, so we're, like, particularly sensitive about this. Be fire safe. You know what I'm going to recommend is get, like, a tiny fire extinguisher. Keep it near your altar, maybe underneath or some bullshit like that. You always know where to use it.
Yep.
Keep an eye on the bloody expiration dates and such like that, so that way you can put a fire out if something bad happens. We have, like, 12 fire extinguishers around our house.
Yeah, we have one.
Or something, like, everywhere. We have one underneath the house.
Yeah.
Where it's just storage.
Yeah.
You know? But it's just like, you always, always, always want to be safe with that stuff. You know, err on the side of caution. Yeah. Trust me, it's worth it.
Yeah. So, anyway, the Fae will find the item.
I gotta make my fire lecture.
Thing, yeah.
Be fire
so
safe.
the Fae will, if they can find the object, they will put it in your path. And the timing on this is certainly not absolute, because how long does it take you to find your car keys when you lose them?
That's true. That's true.
But you know, you do want to make sure that they understand that that trinket that you're parting with is for them. So you can either leave it by the candle for a little while, but you can also move it to your little fairy garden if you have a fairy garden that you're keeping up, or you can place it outside, or you can just leave it on your altar so that the Fae can do with it as they wish. And sometimes it's just like, look at that pretty shiny thing right there. Yeah. And sometimes it's like, I'm going to take this home with me. Yeah. So, you know, there's a lot of variation to it. And there's a ton more that we can talk about with the Fae. We could do probably 10 shows and not run out.
Oh my god, just on the Fae alone, no question.
But this is a pretty brief intro to working with the Fae that is based in practical experience that we've had.
Yeah, this is primarily focused on the experiences we have and the knowledge that we already have, just sort of like filled in by some research. So, like, definitely, if we didn't cover, like, a particular thing that you know about the Fae, then, like, reach out, talk to us about it, comment about it below, or what have you, and we can totally have a discussion about it. Remember that everybody practices a little different, so this is, we are striving for a community of like-minded and peaceful individuals. So we're not trying to, like, shit on somebody's belief just because it's not the belief that you have. That's okie dokie. They can be different, guys. That's how that works. It's literally, I mean, differential religion is the seed of like a bunch of tragedy in the world. So like, let's not do that. Let's all just be like accepting and fun. But yeah, so this was an introduction to working with the Fae. This was the Horn and Cauldron podcast. I have been John Norgrove. This has been Julie Norgrove. If you're watching us on YouTube, don't forget to like this video, comment below, share, subscribe, ring the bell, and let us know what you think. Have you worked with the Fae before? Comment below if you have. If you have not, is there a particular reason why? Is it just not an interest of yours? Or have you, kind of tried to and not had success? Or something to that extent?
Or are you afraid to?
Are you afraid to? Or have you heard a thing? Or do you believe a thing that you necessarily disagree with us about? Which is always interesting. I love to learn, what a particular person's interpretation of things is, or what their particular bend of reality is. It's very observationalist. I like seeing how the waveform collapses for others, as it were.
Yeah.
So that sort of a thing is always incredibly interesting to me, to see where the translations shift. But if you're just listening to us on the podcast network, thank you for listening. Please subscribe, and if you want more and in-depth and more stuff, or if you would like to check out our Working with the Fae Book of Shadows pages, which is going to be brief of what we went over and the correspondences, the complete list of correspondences, as well as the second page or the back of the page is both of the spells written out for you. Hit us up on Patreon. Subscribe to our Patreon thing. Right now they are up. I need to work out the naming for our Patreon tiers,
Yeah,
but they're there. You subscribe to Patreon and you'll have access to them, don't worry. As well as I always make cell phone backgrounds. Right now the backgrounds are primarily focused on the cell phones that we have, which is whatever, iPhone 12 somethings, Pro Maxes, I don't fucking know. I don't know how this works. I'm both young and old at the same time. My collapsing disposition towards this stuff is very confusing. But I engineer them for my phones, but I keep my raw files. So if you subscribe to our Patreon and you download the wallpapers and they don't fit your cell phone, just send me a message about your make and model, and I can look up the actual screen resolution, and it's 5 seconds for me to adjust it and just send it to you for the right size.
Yeah.
And they're really cool, actually. I've totally changed over to a Horn and Cauldron podcast background. Julie's always rocking the newest one. So right now we have Horn and Cauldron specific with our new label. I redesigned it so it's super dope. That happened one podcast ago. It's a little bit more on brand for our sort of retro wave styling for this stuff.
Yeah.
And then we also have one for Aphrodite, which is really cool. I'm really happy with that one. And then our one for Ostara, which is
it's
very
fun.
Very considerably Ostara. So yeah, they both turned out really cool. I'm really happy with the way those turned out. And if you're listening to this live and you are jumping over to Patreon, it generally takes me about a week. So expect this Working with the Fae BOS pages to come out by about next Monday. Or sometimes sooner, but about next Monday. It takes me about a week to get them all dialed in, and then you'll have those, and join us in doing all that stuff. It's fun.
Yeah,
they're turning out really cool. We've got a lot of stuff out there.
Yeah, and our next podcast is going to be a deep dive into Thor.
Yeah, we're going north, so you're going to hear a little bit more out of my face, mostly because off the top of my head I can tell 5 classic Thor tales at a minimum. This is my wheelhouse is Norse mythology. Those are my people. So it's gonna be really cool. Thor is an interesting character, to say the least. So either way, I've been John Norgrove. This has been Julie Norgrove. This has been the Horn
and Cauldron
podcast. And we will catch you guys on the flip side. Stay witchy, y'all.
Thank you.